I think that again, it's discernment and what is it triggering in you as a parent. So looking at it, obviously we have to keep our children safe. And we also have to believe that innately our children are geniuses. They have so much intelligence. And I think we forget that sometimes. I think we forget, like, we take the whole role on ourselves. If I gave my kids anything, it was I wanted them to know that they were loved. I wanted them to have a love for learning and a curiosity for life.
2, 1, 0.
Hi, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Thank you so much for being here. I have with me my good friend Kristin Van Wey. Back on the show for the third time. She was my guest on episode 210, where we talked about discovering your purpose in life, and on episode 287, where we talked about fear, resurrection, and living your best life ever. In this episode, Kristin and I are focused on conscious parenting, something I'm working really hard to be and do, and try really hard every day. This is why I have people like her as my friends. As a mother to 7 children and a grandmother to 5 grandchildren, she certainly has the experience. Mixing that with her vast training across various holistic modalities, and I am sure you'll be as blown away as I was. Kristin is the founding director of Let's and the CEO of Essentials First. She is a wellness expert and a sought-after speaker and educator. She has helped tens of thousands experience insight, understanding, and remarkable results. She's also involved with charities. She works with communities in crisis, and one of the first to volunteer when disaster hits. Seriously, she'll just leave everything and go on the plane and just be there when an earthquake happens. She's just an incredible human being. This is the first episode in a series that Kristin and I did about parenting, and in future episodes we will be talking about gut health for your child, how what happened during pregnancy affect your child's whole life, and more and more. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hello, Kristin, my sweet darling Kristin. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful parenting series. And I can't even wait for us to start and dive in. And today we're going to talk about conscious parenting, how to be present with your child. And we always start talking about something and then we go somewhere else. So we'll see. It's going to be an unfolding, wonderful surprise. So thank you for being here.
You are so welcome. I can't wait to talk about something that is so near and dear to my heart and something that I feel is so needed in the world today. Being conscious in our own life as women and mothers and fathers who aren't represented on this call, but conscious parenting and raising a generation of conscious children.
Yes. Do you think that the new babies that are coming to the world, do you see that they act differently?
I think that there's some baseline human behavior in all babies from all generations, but I will tell you that my younger children, I have 7 kids. So my older children up through, I'd say my first 5, my second, the last 2 children that I have, they are they are wired differently. And now I have 5 grandchildren, and I have seen the newer generation coming from, my own family. And yes, I would have to say that there is subtle shifts in mindset, the way that their brains operate. That, like, maybe it's just because human beings are so smart, and as the world evolves, the babies are being evolved with us, and so they come out of the womb knowing how to operate a remote control or a cell phone or technology. They're just wired a little differently, but I don't know if that has more to do with the exposure that we as conscious mamas, when the babies are in our stomach, they're really nature's head start in there, or if it is that it is a new generation of children that are going to take the world into a new direction. So it's a lot to contemplate.
A lot. I was talking to one of my coaches, and she actually saw that she is seeing a shift in the last decade with kids. It's almost like younger kids are having behaviors that they're supposed to have when they're a teenager. For example, My 2.5 year old decided to like close the door on me one day when he wanted some privacy. And he's 2.5. Like, I thought this should come much later. I'm like, oh my god, what's gonna happen when you're gonna be a teenager? I'm gonna handle that. And then we went to a Passover dinner that was amazing at my friend's house. And she's got a toddler. She's got big brothers, but he's same age as my son. And at the end of dinner, he did the same thing. He just locked the door and turned off the light. I was like, what is going on with those kids? Yes, babies will be babies and kids will be kids, but there is some kind of a more mature behavior on their part.
Yeah, I can see that. And again, I think brain development is changing a little bit, the neurostimulation. Like there is a lot of levels to this conversation. We are moving into a new era. We are moving into a time of more synarchy, like this model where everything is this way and teamwork and working together versus autonomy and top down of corporations and things like that. So I think we see that, and I believe that the kids coming now are we're seeing that they really are more evolved or evolved in a different way. So there's a lot of spiritual traditions that teach or believe that as we move closer to this, whatever you want to call it, Zion, Age of Aquarius, this mindset that's coming.
Aquarius. I love that song.
That's right.
Aquarius.
That's right. As we move into that, the entire nervous system, the structure of our brains is going to change to be able to evolve into that we are evolving into a new type of person. I really love the gene keys, and Richard Rudd talks about, and also human design. They talk about in 2027 how this nine-centered being that we've been evolving into for the last almost 300 years will be fully on board. So if something like that were true, and you can all go back to the Mayan calendars and all of these,
What is a nine-centered being?
a nine-centered being right now, traditional.
Is it a dragon?
No, this would be typically in energy medicine. You'll hear seven chakras, seven main centers of information.
So we're going to be more centered?
We're going to be moving to a nine-centered being.
Mm.
So that just means that there is going to be a completely different way of handling life. Like our solar plexus, this whole space of information and knowledge from the gut is our first brain. It receives information far faster than our brains do in our head. And so when you say nine centered being, it's more about the evolution that our emotional center and this ganglia of information in the gut is going to start making more sense to us. Right now, we don't track a lot of it, but it's going to start making more sense and be part of our consciousness.
And what's going to trigger it, and how can you tell that you have this extra awareness?
Well, I believe it's going to come in the way that we treat each other. First off, it's going to happen that our children are going to be more geared towards communication and relationships. It's going to be a transition, and I think we are going to be able to gauge that by the way societies run. Right now, we have a global, I'm going to call this a global pandemic of everything from sex trafficking to domestic violence and abuse to rape culture to child brides all across the world in different tones. And when we start taking care of each other, you're going to know it's like a network where the entire network is aware of the entire network. So right now, we've got these seven centers, and we're not maybe as aware as we could be that we are actually impacted by the way that somebody totally across the world who we don't know, we are impacting each other. And so it's this universal sense of love and awareness that our actions do matter. And I think that's the gauge. And so we can gauge it right now in our personal lives, in the way that we consciously raise our children, the way that we talk, communicate, love with our partners, our families, our jobs. We talked earlier about kind of this top down ego model that's kind of going away right now, but it will take generations.
It will. I don't see how, because the people that are in power would love to have this top. If you're in the top, why would you like an equal society where everybody can get rich and wealthy? You will do anything to destroy it.
Well, under the old model, you will. The newer model will say that when you are allowing the consciousness of everybody, everyone rises together. So there will not be the power struggles for even them. I mean, I think the world is governed by fear.
You think the big people on the top that are orchestrating a lot of the disasters in this world in order to control the population will all of a sudden have an awakening and will mold into this more equal society?
I don't know that they'll see it that way. It may take a generation of losing some of the hierarchy, but when the world
Hmm.
begins to awaken collectively and there's a greater amount of people, it's like the hundredth monkey syndrome. Like when more people have a pure and open heart, you will see through the illusions. You will no longer be able to be lied to. So it'd be like, we've got these allegory stories from everything from Disney stories to fairy tales from long, long ago. But maybe you think of the yellow brick road, and you think of who was hiding behind the curtain all this time. And so these roles that we play and that are being played in front of us are eventually the curtain's going to be pulled and we will be able to
Hmm.
see truth, and that will be all that matters. And we will see that.
In Kabbalah, there is the term of seeing beyond the veil, and we see, according to the Kabbalah studies, that we only see the 1%, and sometimes we have glimpses beyond the veil into the 99% of what is.
So what if this new evolution of humanity helps us to see even 5% or 10%, and then eventually it increases as we can manage these new feelings and behaviors, and we get out of survival mode. We're not in fear anymore, and we've dealt with what is called the seven core wounds of humanity. It's pretty much in every tradition, but there are seven core wounds, and these wounds need to be healed individually, and then they need to be healed collectively. And the more of us who,
Yeah, and the core of what you said was we need to be able to handle it. Again, I'm drawing from my studies of Kabbalah is that we are the vessel, and if there is a lot of light that comes in and we can't handle it, it can almost break us. So we need to expand our capacity to contain all this light, all this knowledge, because it's either gonna make us or break us, because it's intense.
so how do we do that then is the question.
How do we do that, and how do we do that as parents? So we are parents to new type of kids that are, I believe that the souls that are coming to this world are more evolved than us, and they came here because they're ready to handle what's going on and all the major, like we're going through such a major shift in history, and they're here because I believe they can be leaders and contain it and move forward. And so us as parents, we have a bigger job even to do. So how do we expand our consciousness so we can be good for our kids?
The most important gift that we give our children is our own growth and development. It's also recognizing what is ours and what is the collective's, because a lot of us are very sensitive to what's happening around us, so we can be impacted by that. So when we are willing to go through and have a better understanding of our own challenges, our own challenge patterns, these seven core wounds that live inside of each of us, as we heal ourselves, the capacity to understand and see through that veil is going to increase, which allows us then to help the children that we birth to step into their genius, to step into who they are at earlier ages, maybe than we did, because we still have neurology, we still have a mind, we still have a body, we still are human. And so these kids are more evolved, but if we as parents don't see who they are and don't know how to raise them to live into their genius, then it takes yet another generation.
How do we see into who they are and not see, we see the world as we are, not as the world is. So how can we see our kids for what they really are without our filters, our judgments, our core wounds? Like I think in any communication between a parent and a child, there are all these layers that are blocking the truth of what this child may be in need or capable for. Even when you have the best intentions and you're really conscious and you're really evolved, just being a human being, you have all these conditions.
I would have to say the answer to that is twofold. probably a lot more than that, but you are the perfect one to raise your baby because it was co-created in your bodies, right? And so the more that we can consciously co-create life from conception is really important. Now a lot of us don't get to go back to conception. We weren't that aware. We just made a baby. But if we can go back and realize first and foremost that that baby was created from our DNA, and there's parts of us moving through them. So we are going to be the best person to see our children because there's a lot of us we see in them. So the more that we can heal ourselves, we're not mirroring our own projections onto our kids because we've made it through. We've healed those woundings that we have. It's called fragmentation. We pull it back together. We pull our wholeness back together the best we can so that when we see our children, it's through a divine filter of love. It's love, and love is really the glue that binds us all together. So the more that we can work with our partners and the more that we can communicate and heal the core wounds that trigger us, the more then we're going to have this filter for our kids. The other part is that our kids are who they are regardless. Like we have story after story after story of kids who come out of just horrific backgrounds and they rise into just massive amounts of impact and leadership. And so there's something encoded within each one of our DNA. So we have the genetic part, but then we have who are we and why are we here individually?
Nature and nurture.
Yeah, so we've got both of those, but with love and presence, I believe that we will be guided to see. And obviously, we can't micromanage all of our own shadows and challenges. That's like a big job. It's a lifetime journey for all of us. So just having the faith that our kids are who they are and they came encoded with everything that they need and that you're the perfect parent for that child. Our children chose to come at this time on the planet because they were designed to manage it, like you said earlier. And they came through us as physical beings and spiritual beings. And so to me, it's like Bruce Lipton says that the womb is nature's Head Start program. And I've seen that with my own kids. I've seen it as I've traveled the world. And if a child is being born in the rural communities of Haiti versus in New York City, and the environments are completely different, that child was actually nurtured to be fine in whatever it was environment that it was birthed into. That's not always healthy, but it is prepared because remember, the mother's hormones, the mother's food it eats, the energy, the emotions, the chemistry, everything is flowing through that child while it's in the womb. And it's a completely different conversation if we talk about adoption and other circumstances as well, because there's always that birth energy of the parents. And I feel like love and presence and the willingness to look at ourselves as conscious parents and taking care of ourselves as conscious parents is the best gift that we can give to our children and give them the ability to see who they are because they were loved.
I was the perfect mom until I gave birth. Like I had I had all these ideas about what it's gonna be like, and like if I saw a parent with a child that had a tantrum, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be so disciplined with my son. And now today, like my son will just look at me with his puppy eyes, and I'm like, okay, just have whatever you want. I love you. And there's so many things I feel like, especially recently, I've been dealing with a little bit of the age of between 2 and 3 when they become more present into who they are and their separation from the world and the need to prove to themselves that they're capable, and they're a little confused at this age, I believe, and like knowing that they're a separate being and figuring out what their place in the world and in the family is. And so I've been dealing with some tantrums and crying and all that, and dealing with my own wounds surfacing, apparently. And I feel like the work that I do now on myself is so much deeper than any other time in my life. A, because I have the intention of raising a phenomenal human being and not mess it up. I think we all mess it up eventually. And I have messed up many times. But to the best of my ability to not mess him up and to raise him so he will have the best life ever, which is what every parent wants for their kids. And I also feel like, you know how you said they feel your energy, they read the hormones, and I think I was dealing with a little bit of postpartum depression. And during my pregnancy, I lost my cat and I was dealing with grief and I had bronchitis. And so there were a lot of strong emotions while he was in utero. There was a lot of strong emotions in the first year when COVID hit. And a lot of strong emotion with everything that I was going on. And I still breastfeed him. He's every once in a while. And I heard so many times, oh, he's taking on your emotions. And so there is this, on one hand, like I feel so guilty he's taking on my emotions. On the other hand, it's like, what can I do about it? These are my emotions. How can I put them aside and be like, okay, now we're breastfeeding, so I'm gonna just like put everything aside and breastfeed you, or something like that. Or I'm gonna shut my emotions because it's gonna influence you. So how do you navigate that?
Well, first off, emotions are energy and they're chemicals. And so there's really actually no way to shut them down. The best thing you can do is to learn how to navigate them and express them naturally. What is actually the most important question that we have to ask when we're raising our children? Like, what is the essential elements that are necessary for human development and life and joy in life? We will never, regardless of how awakened we are or how aware and how present we are, we will never be able to block pain. So we
Right.
can't block all that. All we get to do is be more authentic with it. And I think that's the difference
Mm-hmm.
is there's a lot of mom guilt and shame and we're trying to do the best we can and we feel like we fail. But in essence, we're asking the wrong question. It We all have emotions. We all have bad days. He has a bad day, you have a bad day, your partner has a bad day. The right question is can we show up in love? How can
Mm-hmm.
we communicate those times with the people we love? We can't push it down. That comes out in illness. It comes down in out in all kinds of other areas. You can't put it away. You can't hide that. And especially children from the birth to 8 years old, at least 7 years old. The brain waves are still forming in a very real way. They're receiving. I love the work of Bruce Lipton again. It's because he goes into the brain chemistry and every part of our system is still on play and record mode up until that age with the way that our system responds. And then eventually we get to 7, 8 years old and it just goes on playback. Well, it is, but remember, your baby was born specifically for you and at his development level to match your development level. So he's going to be okay, and you grow together. And the more that you grow, the more that you both evolve. It takes a deep love, in my opinion, of becoming a parent for the first time, and then each child you bear after that. There is this sense of this is a big job, and there's so much responsibility, but there's so much love oftentimes that can grow and expand us because maybe we wouldn't make the same decisions if it was only us. Now I have to take responsibility. I've got to get my act together for this other human that is part of my life now.
Yeah, and if I didn't have those times where my communication was not gentle and was kind of not kind, and instead of being the parent, I was a 2-year-old with my 2-year-old. It took those time for me to go deeper, to go deeper and heal some things inside, to work with somebody to help me. Because if this wouldn't happen, if I wouldn't see myself like, oh, I just yelled at him, I don't want to be that mom that yells. So I reach for help so I can understand myself better, so I can act like what is triggering. Sometimes we're so much out there we don't even take a look inside and check in with what's going on with us.
Yeah, I think that that's a really real thing. And that's why at the beginning, when we talked about the best gift you give your kids is your own personal development. And as we break, I would say, generational patterns, knowing that it's not just you, you inherited such a big part of the patterns that you have, and you were raised in an environment up until you were 7 or 8 years old. And then you, on top of that, had all of.
Oh my God, the environment I was raised in was super, super duper tough.
Yeah, so there's no blame there personally when we're just acting out of auto response a lot of the time. And so there are ways of becoming more aware as we mature. We first have to even recognize we have something to be aware of, and then we begin to notice. But would it be okay as a mother to have a temper tantrum but then catching ourselves and then laughing about it, or forgiveness is a big part of the process. It's just part of the process, because there isn't a day goes by that we're probably not going to do something that we wish we hadn't ever thought something, or so maybe the question isn't how do I become the perfect parent, in like there's this, how would you like to just have an energy like this all the time, or just I always feel joy? Part of being human is to have polarities. That adds variety, it adds drama. That's every good story in Hollywood or in the movies or a book.
I'm so good with drama though.
Yeah, it's life. So maybe it's not so much about not having them, because we want the waves, but it's knowing how to listen. I always say, like, how do we hear the inner wisdom within us that will guide us to make the right decisions? And if we as adults can learn how to identify that part within us, how do we hear the divine or our higher selves to make decisions? And we teach our children how to do that, then these waves are going to be okay, because they know that there is also a safe space to express themselves. We weren't given that as a child, most of us. I would say that the average adult did not have a safe place to express themselves emotionally. I mean, I would love to take a poll. I don't know anybody who was. I certainly didn't feel, and I had great parents, but I didn't feel safe to express my emotions and share my biggest dreams. So if we start asking these questions to say about us with our own parenting, is one, how do I identify the triggers and start working through them, just like that's why I'm here on earth, and how can I be more and more aware of what those triggers really are? It's not really the situation that we're having a temper tantrum over, it's all this other stuff that built up. And so it's like, how do I begin to recognize it? And then how do I teach my child how adults who love can also manage that? Can we sit down and apologize? Can we look at each other and go, you know what, I was really tired. That had nothing to do with you. Let me be more present and listen. What do you actually need?
Yeah, I had that conversation with my little one. Like, I'm sorry, you don't like when mommy talks like that. And he's like, no. We have whole conversations,
That's so beautiful. That's conscious parenting right there, Orion.
and we had like here's a really great moment we had. We went to a Passover dinner, and the one that I mentioned, and when we came back home, it was midnight already, and he was didn't want to leave the car seat. He was like, "No, I'm not going home," and he was crying. And I just stood there. Like, I could have just, like, pulled him and, like, no, we're going to sleep now, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't do that. I just stood there. And I'm like, looks like you're really angry. And he's like, yeah. Are you sad that, did you have a lot of fun and you're sad that we were leaving? And he was like, yeah. And then he started talking to me, and I'm kind of acknowledging his emotions. And I'm like, "Did you have a good time? Did you play? And this is why you want to go back?" And he's like, "Yes, yes." And the more I give him language to what he's feeling, the more it's calming down. And then 20 minutes later, he's telling me that an older kid there, and he was like, the big boy was talking to me, and he was like so enamored by the fact that the big boy was talking to him. And he started telling me all about the evening, and we kept talking. We have really cool conversations. And then I'm like, well, mommy's kind of tired. Can we just go and lay down? I was like, pretty much no. It's like kind of like I'm comfortable here. I was like, yeah, I know, but mommy is standing, and it's late, and mommy's tired. Do you mind if we'll go? And I promise you, we can keep talking while I put you to sleep. And it's like, okay. And that's how we resolved it.
That sounds so beautiful. I think it's again, it's that presence. Oftentimes, as I've raised my own children and I have grandchildren to observe my children raising their children, and I can see the patterns. And just all of us, as we're out in community and we have friends with kids and we have our own, we watch how we could de-escalate some of these things by just listening. And again, each child's going to have a different personality. You can't raise every child the same. They're not the same. They really come intact with so much of their spirit. And so I watch sometimes, and I've been observing myself more often of my auto responses. And the more that I tailor to the individual child, the more response I get. I have one of my, he's 18 now, but he's always been my lover. He puts his arms around me and he touches, he still snuggles me. He comes and he's like, I mean, he's a toucher and he's a communicator, and it's so effortless for us, for me, not so much with my husband. But my husband has others of our children that communicate really well with him. And I have had to learn, like with Rylan, I'm more touch oriented, and I listen. Whenever I listen to him, I know that I have to stop every single thing I'm doing, and I look him in the eye and I touch him. And that works for him, and he feels heard, and therefore he comes to me with all kinds of things. And that's the other thing. Starting early, having the conversations like you did with your son creates it creates relationship of trust, and it creates a root system so that later, as these children get into their 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 year olds, that there's a relationship there.
Yeah, even when he was like 1 years old, we used to have conversations when he just learned a few words before bedtime. Where I'm like, yeah, did you see the plane? And he's like, plane, plane. Yeah, like it started this way, but it's like a thing for us to have conversations before we go to bed. Not every night, but many nights.
You start the habit of what works for you and your child, and then you build on that as they get older and get more vocabulary and more skills. But oh, side note is I used to be in this program, How to Teach Your Baby to Read by Glenn Doman, and I took all the homeschool classes by him.
Oh, she was on this podcast, and we took the course.
Oh, I loved it. So I've been doing flashcards and bits with my babies since they were in the womb. As soon as they popped out, man, my older children were raised with Glenn Doman's work. And he says that babies are linguistic geniuses by 9 months old. That they understand and they can't articulate it because of the motor skills, but they understand everything we're saying. And so I don't know that a lot of parents understand that. A lot of babies are reading by 9, 10 months old. They can point to words, they can differentiate. They're very, very intelligent.
So I have to share with you. Before you keep going, I know the work of Jean Doman, and I took part of the course because I wasn't able to take all of it. But I haven't done it yet. Do you think it's too late, or can I start now?
Oh no, start now. You know, the younger, below 2 years old is when so much of the brain is developing, but you start exactly where you are at whatever age your children are, and you can really influence the way that they think. Because remember, all the neurons.
We do bits of intelligence, which is for anybody who, I mean, the Jen Doman episode is going to be in the show notes. And she's talking about doing bits of intelligence. You have big cards with a photo and a word on it, and you just go really, really fast, and you show your kid, and they, because their brain is about 800 times faster than ours, they just they just get it. But I haven't done any language with him. Like I haven't done reading with him.
It's so much fun. They're so smart. By 3 years old, my oldest daughter was reading, reading, reading by 3 years old. But I started Flipkart like the moment she was born. I did their whole program. And I just wrote big, big words in red letters, and I did the flashcards, and I would just say the word, like, truck, doll, and I'd pick their favorite words, whatever their favorite words are, and you do 10 words at a time, and you just like, you only learn in that system when you're in a good mood. So we can talk a lot more about Glenn Doman's program and how to teach your baby to read and how to teach your baby math and developing intelligence, and whether it's bits of information on your favorite topics from artists to inventors to mathematicians to musicians, it doesn't matter. Whatever you enjoy, you teach, and you only teach when you're in a good mood and when the child is in a good mood, so that they always have a love of learning.
Yeah, what's your take on TV?
I would throw them all out the door. My kids did not have TV almost at all. I mean, it's almost impossible nowadays, but I would say make it the exception, not the rule. I think a lot of children have been raised by the TV now, and I know a lot of the children who are raised with gaming. And so there's no judgment against that. It's kind of the society we're in, and they're doing, maybe they'll grow up to be coders or inventors or something. I don't know. So, each household is different around how they feel about it. But I know in Glenn's program, the research at the time, and maybe there's more research out by now, but the brain development doesn't need to be influenced by that type of learning system until a little bit older. So when the babies are younger, it's ideal to let them touch and feel and be in the physical world. Let them climb trees, let them get dirty, let them go out in the garden and help you. Let them work with you in the kitchen from 2 years old. And
So I do all that, and I like the work of Maria Montessori. And like recently, my babysitter left for a month, and I find myself just like, okay, let's watch Bob the Builder for 15 minutes or 30. It's like,
it's like a break for us. It has, and just look at it that way. It's not building their, I mean, yes, they're building intelligence, but
yeah, I know it's not good for him, and I try never show him any TV that I don't know what the content of it is. Like I try stuff that are slow and not this like cartoonish like frame. Like it can be really confusing and overwhelming for a little brain to get all this speedy cartoonish stuff. Even like I see some toddler programs, I'm like, that's way too fast for a toddler.
well, the other thing is I mean, this is a different topic, but our children are being desensitized to violence, to crime, to things. Even though in a cartoon setting, there's still a lot. I've watched some of the cartoons, and there's a lot of slight violence to it to a degree. There's a lot of things that I think are programming our kids' brains. And I mean, there's definitely a lot of research as we get older into the brain development and the importance of the things that they're exposed to. Overstimulation, dopamine effects as they're young children. Like the average parent is going to do the best to screen things and make sure that they're getting a good content, but just understand that not everybody has a pure heart or mind. There's a lot of addictive qualities to the things we watch. I mean, we know subliminal messaging is implanted in almost every single thing that's created. I mean, that's just part of marketing. And it's not necessarily bad subliminal messaging, but it could be as much as, you know, you can't even barely see a picture of a popcorn like they used to show us at the movie theater. Like they'd have just your brain picks it up faster than your eye can comprehend it. So I don't have a level of trust with the media and the people who are creating these series to know that that's, I don't want to fill that up as much, but I do understand that as parents who are taking care of their kids, that they moms have to have a break too. And there's some good programs out there. They can learn about nature, and I love the nature programs and exposing them to things like music.
Yeah, sometimes I put something about the holidays. Like it's just so much easier to like just show him something about a holiday than try to explain it. But yeah, definitely becoming more discerning and like he woke up dreaming about Bob the Builder, and then I was like, maybe we're watching too much. I don't think it's a good idea.
Use your discernment. That's, again, there's no make wrong or no judgment for anybody. It's just use your discernment and know the difference between the TV being a babysitter and what's best for the child and where the line is.
Right, yeah. It's always about well, it's the 80/20 rule, I guess. So, how can I be a conscious parent without being a helicopter mom? For example, today at the playground, two kids interact with my son, and they were mean to him a few times, and I said nothing. I was like, okay, he's gonna solve it. But my son is that type of sweet being that when somebody pushes him, he doesn't do anything. He just stands there. And like, how can I teach him the lesson of protecting himself and not being there to protect him all the time without like just doing it for him?
I think that, again, it's discernment and what is it triggering in you as a parent. So looking at it, obviously we have to keep our children safe, and we also have to believe that innately our children are geniuses. They have so much intelligence. And I think we forget that sometimes. I think we forget, like, we take the whole role on ourselves. If I gave my kids anything, it was I wanted them to know that they were loved. I wanted them to have a love for learning and a curiosity for life. And I also wanted them to have the confidence to solve problems. And I didn't always do that as well because I had my mama bear moments too.
I have too many mama bears moments. I think I'm overprotective.
Yeah, I think that's normal, especially with your first child too. When you have if you have more than one child and you see how they interact with each other, then you have like this built-in observation. But when it's with somebody else, you don't know where the parameters are. You don't know if they will go too far. And so I think again it's back to communication in the age of the child. So if he's 2 and you were to go stand beside him or sit down on the ground beside him while those other kids were coming, but not too soon, like see how he's going to react. And then, like you did with the other example of sitting down and having a conversation of what's going through that for him, and asking him about his response. If he's not responding at all, let him explain that to you, depending on his age. They are very resilient. And if we're helicopters over, like we're super protective, then when they go into any setting where we're not there, they're not going to have the confidence to know even how to respond.
Ah, gosh, I messed up again.
No, you didn't mess up. What you get to do though is observe yourself in the situations. Is he in harm, and does he have the skill set or tool set? And then role play at home in different ways. Give him examples of what it feels like to be in his power, because again, we have these core wounds, and
How do I role play what happened in the playground?
you may not be able, well, you just have a conversation around it. He's only 2, so this is a really tender young age, but it seems like you guys have a deeper relationship of communication already.
Yeah, it's pretty bright, yes.
So I would ask him, when somebody comes up to you at the playground and they're pulling a toy from you and you don't know who they are, like, just ask him. Ask him how he feels, just like you did the other night, because again, even though he may not be able to articulate it, role playing in it may be as simple as giving him an outcome. When this happens, is it possible, or do you feel comfortable doing this, or what would it look like, or can you have a signal? Maybe it's as simple as that. Can you give mommy a signal, like, let's create something so that you always know that I'm right there and I'm watching, but I am 100% confident that you're going to know how to manage your friendships on the playground when you're meeting new kids that have all different personalities. But if you ever need me, you give me the mom, whatever the mom is, the mom look or the mom finger or something, so that you always know, he always knows that you're there. And I have this friend who was teaching her baby to have nighttime patterns, to go to sleep and to stay in bed. And this child was under a year old. And it was really beautiful for me to watch how she was doing that. And it was as simple as letting the child know that the parent was always there, even if he couldn't see her. And so it was this series of training him over the course of a few weeks, where they had the little audio thing going, so he could hear her voice, and she would say, "Hey, I'm going to be there in just a minute." So there was this whole routine that they went through, and he's well under a year, and he's not speaking at all, but he could respond, and she could watch him in the video camera, his expressions, and so it was just a matter of the awareness and taking the time to have this conversation with her 9-month-old. And so it's, I think, the same concept of walking them through. One of the things I had to do, I didn't finish telling the story earlier. Like, one of my sons is really snuggly and communicative, and then my other kids don't like to be touched as much. I have other children who aren't touchers. They just want to auditorily hear me. I'd say, "Hey, you need to look me in the eye when I'm talking to you, because I'm very visual." But if they're auditory, they didn't like to look. So those types of understanding how our children communicate is being able to then have the conversations in a language that they can hear. Could you give your son some possible scenarios? Just talk him through. When my kids were little and I knew some of my kids would have a temper tantrum if we left the park, I used to say, "Hey kids, we're leaving in 30 minutes. Hey, Ashton, we're leaving in 20 minutes. Is there anything else you guys want to play on? We have 10 minutes. I had certain kids that I had to walk them down and get them to the place where they were ready to leave so that we didn't have a meltdown rather than just saying, hey, we're leaving now, and then dragging them into the car. And like those are different scenarios so that you can communicate it beforehand. Or if I knew that we were going somewhere that they had to sit still, I would practice. Okay, we're going to practice being at the wedding today. Okay, here's your chair, and you're going to sit in the chair, and then we would practice sitting still, and build that time up. But they have to be taught behavior. Kids need parameters before the age of 7, 8 years old more than anything. They need structure, they need parameters. And we're living in a society right now that doesn't like parameters. They don't want to be told what to do oftentimes. And the parenting I've seen shift a lot from like no discipline whatsoever, like spankings back in the day, to absolutely no discipline at all. And so you have
Right, yeah. It's like where's the line? Like,
there is a line, and I think it depends on the child. But again, is it loving? Is it respectful? Is discipline coming out of an auto response that's aggressive out of somebody? That probably never feels good. But if you can look at your child's personality and start to be more aware of the line before the breakdown, right? We can probably avoid most temper tantrums. Don't go to the store with your toddler if he's exhausted and missed nap time and you just gave him a piece of sugar. He's probably not going to do very well. And you keep feeding him sugar, and then eventually he just has a flat out meltdown, right? Those are things that we can avoid as parents by scheduling things a little differently. But there will be times that there's meltdowns, and that's totally normal. And the child doesn't need to grow up shamed either. Remember how earlier we talked about how as adults, we probably didn't have a very safe space to express ourselves emotionally. We're training our children right now how to express themselves emotionally. So if they are needing to have a meltdown, it's probably okay depending on how it's managed and the timing, and letting them know that it is okay to feel this way. It would also be okay to get in the car and go home so I can hold you and listen to you, and it's okay to cry. It's okay to have that.
my God, there's so much to learn.
Yeah, we learn with our kids.
Yeah, what was the difference in your parenting between kid number one and kid number seven?
Kid number one, I cared about every single thing, and I micromanaged every morsel of food, every bit of sunlight. I mean, I wanted to be the perfect parent.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's normal, and that's so normal. And by child 7, I wondered why I was so uptight. I wondered why I didn't just let things happen organically, and why I just wasn't present, because there's so much more joy when you see the child instead of seeing the schedule or the structure. Like, we did talk about kids need structure and parameters. I don't mean that, but I just mean, gosh, I mean, 2 years old came and she was potty trained, and I was doing the how to potty train in less than a day, or I had her in ballet, and I had her in all these things that I think could have been, and it's fine. All of my children had a lot of varied experiences, and we've had fun with that. And I found that giving my child a box and a marker and letting him climb trees and play outside and work in the garden with me was probably more healthy and effective as far as bonding and developing themselves than trying to do so many other things that I think were expensive and took them out of my home and my awareness. I'm not saying that those things aren't, I should rephrase that a little bit, in that I think all those activities are fine, but it was my mindset behind why they were necessary. And so while my youngest children have had a lot of the same sports and activities and music and all of those things, the stress behind it and the reason I did it is different. So maybe if that makes more sense than the first way that I said it.
It made sense both ways. What are your 3 top tips for stellar parenting?
Stellar parent. Just be you. Love all of you. Love yourself when you have a meltdown, when you feel like a 2-year-old, when you don't love who you are. But love who you are in all of that. So I would say love yourself in all of your glory, and be present for yourself, for your partner, and your child would be the really key one. And do some things for personal development. like learn about your triggers. Go back. I mean, I can't say enough about the Gene Key Golden Pathway as a way of bringing awareness to the triggers and the patterns that we have. So find something that's always going to nurture you and help you move forward in your own path. And whether that's taking an art class or a music class or reading some books, like do things that develop and nurture you, work on yourself, and be present with your kids. And I think what you're going to find is that the journey is actually perfect because it's the truth. Just live the truth. If it's messy, the magic is in the messy.
I love it. So where can people find you and work with you and learn from you?
You can find me at kristinvanwey.com. It would probably be the easiest. You can look at my website. You can send me an email. You can find me on social media channels just under my name.
And just so people know, what can they work with you?
I run the gamut. I have so many different things that I have.
I know you're so multifaceted.
I have a lot of, but it all goes down to who am I and why am I here, and how can I live fully in my purpose, and that includes whether it's conscious parenting or in the workplace or in our homes, right? It relationships with ourselves and other people. So I love to walk people. I love to walk the journey with people, and so I'm here to look at where the parameters are, what somebody wants to create and experience, and then work with them to achieve that so that they have a safe place to discover their own genius.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, my friend. It's always a wonderful. It's always lovely to interact with you. I always feel more expanded after we have a conversation, and I just love who you are and in the world and as a person, as a friend, and I really appreciate our conversation today.
Thank you. I feel the same way for you.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember, be you, love all of you, be present for yourself, your child, your partner, and do some personal development, like listening to Stella Life podcast, which is all about personal development, business development, life development, heart development, everything development, and just love yourself and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.